Of her. She's like a Martian.
God, my hips are huge.
Oh, please. I hate my calves. At least you guys can wear halters. I've got man shoulders.
I used to think there was just fat and skinny. Apparently, there's a lot of things that can be wrong on your body.
My hairline is so weird. My pores are huge. My nail beds suck.
I have really bad breath in the morning.
Ew.
Most people my age are quite familiar with this scene from the 2004 movie Mean Girls. What they're not aware of, however, is that there's a name for the phenomenon that we see in this clip. The term normative discontent was first used in 1984 by Judith Rodin and her colleagues in an article discussing women and weight. Rodin and her colleagues refer to normative discontent as the idea that because of societal standards and cultural expectation, it is normal or typical for women to experience dissatisfaction with their bodies. And very importantly, they propose to address this issue with a mix of education and awareness, body positive programs, challenging media and social norms, and promoting diverse body representation. Unfortunately, we did not really listen to them, and while we can argue that some things got a little bit better in terms of representations and with movements like Health at Every Size, I think there's way too many people, and of course women at the forefront, who experience a lot of dissatisfaction with their body. Now, before we go further, I know that I'm not a woman, but normative discontent is also quite present amongst gay men, and that's why at first I was interested in the phenomenon. And the part of normative discontent that I want to focus the most in this video is the part that exists in the Mean Girls movie, this ritual of bonding over the hatred of our bodies. I was first made aware of the term normative discontent in 2021 while listening to an episode of the podcast Maintenance Phase, in which Aubrey Gordon, one of my favorite podcaster and the co-host of the show, talked about her experience being in Weight Watcher. For those of you who don't know, a big part of Weight Watcher, on top of a very low-calorie diet, are the meetings in which people come together and bond over their experience of trying to lose weight. Apparently, these meetings are supposed to keep each other accountable and motivated to lose weight. But what Aubrey experienced when she went to those meetings when she was younger was mostly just people complaining about their body. She said, for example, that like one person would say like, ugh, my thighs are so fat. And then another would jump in and answer, what are you talking about? You look beautiful. I look terrible. Look at my belly. And then it would continue like this for the whole meeting. This practice is also called fat talk by certain researchers. For example, Dr. Denise March found in 2001 that 93% of the women participating in her study were engaging in some level of fat talk, which 93% is basically everyone engaged in her study. For me, I don't particularly love the term fat talk, although talking about weight can be important. I feel like normative discontent talks about more than just body size and is more inclusive, especially on this side of the pandemic with the new waves of like younger influencers on Instagram and on TikTok. I find that normative discontent has evolved to, yes, include the way our body looks, but also more than beauty standards. You know, nowadays online, you see a lot of people bonding over like their panic attacks or their ADHD symptoms. And that makes the phenomenon much more nuanced and complex than just fat talk. So on the one hand, I think that being able to bond with others and to be able to be honest about our struggles and how we really feel and what we're going through is really, really useful. You know, one of the things that I see a lot as a therapist is people thinking that their life is a complete failure, but that everybody else around them has all of their shit together. So being able to see what's behind closed door and maybe breaking isolation and understanding that other people are suffering too can be really, really great. Movies like Inside Out, for example, can help so many people with understanding with language, and with seeing that they're not suffering alone, right? Like knowing that there's enough people who experience something very similar to me, that they actually made a movie about it. It can be really comforting in a way. But unfortunately, most of the time, normative discontent does not come with the social changes that Judith Rodin suggested 40 years ago. Now, most of the time, it only comes with ways to change your own body or your own mental health or your own life. If 93% of women in that study in 2011 were unhappy about their body, it is not because 93% of the women are ugly. The problem does not come from the individual bodies of each of these women. And the solutions will not come from each of these women individually going on a diet. Normative discontent tend to also be very public, right? These negative comments made on my body are meant to be heard. They're either at a party or maybe on social media. Like Rachel Hollis, a social media influencer, who got even more famous when she posted a photo in which she was flaunting her belly and her stretch mark on Instagram after giving birth. So this is a very complex issue, right? Because I could see that many women were touched by this photo, which really proves to me that people are really starving for regular bodies to be celebrated. But when really looking at this photo and at Rachel Hollis, we need to remember that she's an extremely conventionally good-looking, fit, and skinny social media influencer, being told how brave she is for showing what is essentially still a very conventionally good-looking body on social media. In the gay community, people are also very, very loud about it, especially if there's an event, like if it's Pride Weekend, for example. I cannot tell you how many times I heard men complain about their pride body, or even talking about how hungry they were because they've been starving themselves for a month just so that they could fit into their pride outfit. And I don't want to diminish people's suffering. Like, beauty standards are hard to attain for everyone, but sometimes when people who are so close to beauty standards are celebrated for, talking about their smallest of flaws, it does not leave a lot of space for other people who are maybe further away from what magazines are telling us is the only beauty that exists in the world. I'm not sure why normative discontent is so prevalent. Maybe talking about everything we hate about ourselves is just a defense mechanism. Like Amy in Pitch Perfect, who says that she calls herself Fat Amy so that, and I quote, "twig bitches like you don't do it behind my back." Maybe it's also a way of masking low self-esteem or to fish for compliment. And I think there's probably a real plea for connection in there. And it can be useful in certain contexts. I've been a group therapist for most of my adult life. And there's something really healing in a group therapy to hear that other people are also suffering and to be able to get compassion from them and also for yourself. But just vomiting everything that you hate about yourself on social media or at a party is not what healing is like. In The Body Keeps the Score, a very popular book about trauma, Bessel van der Kolk mentions a group of veterans who meet regularly to talk about their experience in the war. He explains that while these meetings provide a sense of friendship and validation, simply talking about trauma repeatedly without additional therapeutic intervention does not necessarily lead the participants to healing or to recovery. And even worse, he mentions that sometimes some of these veterans were tired of retelling their trauma and wanted to quit the group, but then they would lose all of their support system and all of their friends. The same is also true in Weight Watcher. When people decide this diet's not for me or this group's not for me or I don't like it, if they leave the group, they're also losing all of their friends and all of their support systems. Even in Mean Girls, we clearly see that Katie will only be included in the plastics if she says something negative about herself as well.
Ew.
The takeaway from this video is not to never talk about how you feel about your body or about your mental health ever again. But if you do, please remember Judith Rodin and her colleagues and do more than just venting and superficial talk. Engage in the change that you want to see in the world. Encourage your friends to talk differently about themselves. Find ways to build true, supportive, healing community and not just a place to dump your fears and your trauma. Remember to fight social beauty norms, to diversify your social media feed, and to tell your friends how beautiful and successful they are without them having to criticize themselves first. And let's finish with what Naomi Wolf said. A cultural fixation on female thinness is not an obsession about female beauty, but an obsession about female obedience. If 93% of women, and really 93% of all of us, were spending all of our energy at changing the systems instead of spending it, trying to get a tie gap, the world would probably be a much better place. Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something new. And please let me know in the comment what you think about normative discontent.